The Pashtun Pathan general Kala Pahar. That has to be discussed in greater
Kala
detail.
Pahar is not originally a Hindu prince.
No, he's not a Hindu Brahmin. He's not a Hindu Brahmin.
Oh,
he
that is
a
also
Pashtun
a
Pathan.
propaganda.
Yes, that is also a propaganda. He is originally a Pashtun Pathan who comes and joins Suleiman Karnani's forces, rises to the rank of a commander. And Suleiman Karnani is probably the Sikandar Batchiko of East, the slayer of idols. Suleiman Karnani, when he dispatches his forces for Kalinga under his son Baizad, supported by the key commander Kalapara, how they take down temples, how they are taking down temples like anything, not only in Bengal but also in Orissa or Kalinga for that matter. The fact remains that in spite of all these things that Bengal has seen, that even today, as per the last ASI data which I have seen in 2023, Bengal still stands at number 4 in terms of ancient temples or medieval temples.
Namaste, welcome to Sangam Talks. Today we are pleased to have with us Surya Sarathi Roy ji. Namaste sir, good morning. Surya Sarathi Roy will start a series on the history of Bengal, and this is the first session of this series. Surya Sarathi Roy, by profession, he is a supply chain and logistic professional, but Surya Roy is, in passion, is an Indian heritage conservationist, heritage researcher and explorer, an independent Indic history researcher whose research spans across the history and culture of Brajmandal, Kurukshetra, Odisha, and Sri Jagannath culture, Mewar and Maratha history. He is a keen student of archaeology and focuses on the enlistment of heritage sites and preservation of ancient manuscripts. A life member and researcher with INTAC INTSCH New Delhi headquarters, he is also the director for North India operations of IHAR, that is Indian History Awareness and Research, a Houston-based NGO which engages in research, preservation and practicing of Indian heritage, Indian knowledge system, IKS, and also provides scholarship to bright Indian students engaged in the field of Indian heritage and history research. So we will start the conversation now, and I will ask Mr. Roy to start with a synopsis, maybe the points of the talk.
As you rightly said, in this series, when we discuss about the cultural heritage and history of Bengal, it is very important to understand that what exactly cultural heritage means. So cultural heritage can typically be divided as per the UNESCO definition into tangible and intangible. So tangible is anything which you can see, touch, feel, and that includes anything, I mean, any built heritage, natural heritage, your manuscripts, your forts, temples, all of these architectural stuff, or even manuscripts, inscriptions, coins, which comes under numismatics. Then is the intangible part. The intangible part covers the skill sets, something which cannot be seen but which exists even today, like traditional festivals, or the skill sets, pottery skill sets, painting skill sets, and stuff like that. Now, what is important here to understand is what comprises of the cultural heritage, the components, key components. And as I said, the key components varies from Indian history, historiography, the ancient text, Indology, and people do not often misuse the term Indology or unbeaten archaeology. So that segment of archaeology which deals into Indian excavations and archaeological facts is called Indology. Like something of archaeology which deals with Egypt is called Egyptology. So it is Indology for India. Then obviously numismatics and epigraphy. So these are maritime archaeology, and the texts that I mentioned, why it is important to refer to the text, which gives us a lot of insight into our archaeological findings. In fact, traditionally, historically, if we see many of our texts, be it the Mahakavyas or the Puranic text that has been utilized as a reference point for many of the excavations that has been done by archaeologists like Dr. B.B. Lal or Professor S.R. Rao. and even today, even for the, by K.K. Muhammad and archaeologists, renowned archaeologists like them. Then comes the custodian of cultural heritage. Who are the custodians of cultural heritage, where history is also a part, and it is the Ministry of Culture. But with Ministry of Culture, there are also parallelly a lot of bodies working, some of which reports to the Ministry of Culture and some which are outside of Ministry of Culture, like the Archaeological Survey of India, the National Institute of Oceanographics, INTAC per se, ICOMOS, the International Council for Monuments and Sites, where I'm also a member. And then we have the National Archives, the National Museums, and ICROM, or even the National Museums of the National Science Museums. These are the few bodies which typically take care or act as the custodian of cultural heritage. Since we are discussing Bengal, it is very important for us to understand what comprises and what are the key factors driving the cultural heritage of Bengal. Now, of course, we will be seeing through the slides which all topics we will cover. But to start with, let me give you a flavor of Bengal a little bit, in the sense that historically we find reference of Bengal in many of our Puranic texts. But where does it all start from? It all starts from the fact that we have come across the three terms Anga, Vanga, Kalinga. So where does it come from actually? As per the Puranic text, it is Maharaj Bali, who was the grandson of Bhakt Prahlad. So Prahlad's son Virochan, Maharaj Virochan, and then from Virochan to Bali. So Maharaj Bali had 5 sons from his chief consort, Queen Sudeshna, and they were named as Anga, Vanga, Kalinga, Pondra and Suhama. So Pondra is the Pondravardhan, where Vasudev Pondrik was the king. So we will come to all those part in our next episode in greater details. And then was Suhama. So Anga, obviously, as you know, today is kind of Bihar, Jharkhand area geographically, which there's Vanga is the eastern part, which is the Bangladesh right now. And Kalinga we know is Orissa today, and Suhama and Pondra is the West Bengal and North Bengal mix geographically. This is typically what is there.
Rar Bengal.
This is also another term that is used on another territory. So since you rightly said Rar Bengal, so now we have to also look at the various names that Bengal has been used to. Sometimes they have been used in the Puranic text, sometimes it has been used in much later texts like Arthashastra or Kalidas's Raghuvamsam, or even by the Europeans, and how the term Bengal has been arrived at, over a period of time. So there are typically 10 to 12 terms or names that Bengal has been used to. So Gaura, Vanga, as I said, Vanga, then Vangalam. So the term Vangalam comes from one of the inscriptions which is found in the Brihadeshwara temple. Brihadeshwara temple, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site again. There Rajendra Chola in one of the inscriptions mentions as Vangalam. Then comes the Dakshin Rar, the Uttar Rar or Radha land, what you can say is Baran Brumi. We can also mention as, we also find terms as used as Samatata, which is the current Tripura, you can say. The Britishers used to call it Tipera. So Tipera is nothing but Tripura. We will come again in all this in our next episode, where we will discuss the ancient Bengal with the Puranic Itihasa, the people, sources, geography. And then comes Tamralipta, also one of the names, Tamralipta or Tamluk, current day Tamluk, which is there. Then we have other names such as, what I can recall is
Karna Suvarna.
Karna Suvarna is also the capital of Gaura. It was the capital name, but there are other names which we will come in details. So these are the few names which I wanted to give a filler to. Then comes the the Puranic Itihasa. The one is the name where it comes from, Anga, Vanga, Kalinga. But if we look at the two epics or the Mahakavyas, in Ramayana, if we see, we observe that Maharaj Dasharath's capital, of course we know it's Ayodhya, but Vanga as a territory is included within the kingdom of Maharaj Dasharath. So that is one thing. And then when Sri Rama starts from Ayodhya on his 14 years exile, he also touches certain parts of Vanga as well as certain parts of Kalinga, which we will also come to our latest episodes in greater detail. And it's very interesting actually, and people do not know today which are those areas, which are those spots, and they still exist and they are very much revered and worshipped.
Mostly by tribals in the Chotanagpur Plateau area.
Not only tribals, but even in the mainstream body, in the normal course of our tirthas, some of them are major tirthas also. For example, I'll give you one small example, although it's not from Bengal but from Orissa. There is one temple in Puri, within Puri city, which people don't know or very less known, to many of the people, is the Loknath temple. Now, the term Loknath comes from Lokinath, and how that Lokinath comes in, because when Sri Rama had visited the Sabarpalli, at that place, there was no Shivalingam, and Sri Rama used to worship a Shivalingam every day. So Sri Rama was provided with a Loki, okay, Lau, from which he developed a Shivalingam. So that Lokinath over a period of time came to be known as Loknath Mahadev. And Loknath Mahadev is also a manifestation of Bhima, the Madhyam Pandav, who is the protector of the treasury of Sri Jagannath. Okay. So similarly, there is another Mahadev temple which is very near to the Konark Sun temple, that is called Beleshwar Mahadev. Beleshwar Mahadev is also, made up by Sri Rama, where he was provided with a bale by the villagers over there, from where he developed a lingam, and that's how the temple comes into existence over a period of time. Similarly, in Bengal also, we see certain temples, places in the Rar Bhumi, in Birbhum, the district of Birbhum. There are certain places which have been touched by Sri Ram, which we will cover in the next few episodes. So then comes Mahabharata. In Mahabharata, if we see, Mahabharata is all the more interesting because we see the king of Tamralipta participating in the Swayamvar of Draupadi. So that's very interesting, that's why I said. So he participating in the Swayamvar of Draupadi, and obviously he fails, and then Tamralipta is won over by Bhima when he goes for Digvijay as a part of the Ashwamedh Yagna.
So sir, that king from Tamralipta, is there any mention of his, like I can say, race will not be a good term, but
No, there's no.
Or Nishad maybe.
I don't think there is any mention of any race of that sort. They were all Kshatriyas, because if you look at the socio-economic order of those times, socio-religious, socio-economic order of those times, it is the Kshatriyas or the monarchs eligible for participating in Swayamvara. So that is one thing. Then Vasudev Pondrik I mentioned, the one who used to dress up like Krishna and used to be a fierce hater of Krishna. He used to be the king of Pondravardhan, or which is the current day Bardhaman and area upstairs. So Pondravardhan was that area. So Krishna, Krishna comes in and destroys him, annihilates him. He also destroys the king of Vanga, which is not spoken of much. Not only Vasudev Pondrik, but Vanga also, and later he also comes to Pragjyotishpur to kill Narakasur. So this is one, and then again when we see the Drona Parva, when Arjuna was pursuing Jayadratha, okay, in order to kill him the next day. So that was the time when, on the instruction of Duryodhan, the confederacy of the eastern kings come in to stop Arjuna, which is the kings of Kalinga, king of Vanga, king of Tamralipta, everybody is there. And there is a particular phrase where it is mentioned that the king of Vanga was riding a humongous elephant which was killed by Ghatotkacha, so with a spear. So, and obviously we will, as a part of maritime trade, we will discuss the elephants of this region who are pretty big, those days. So these are some Puranic references that I gave you quickly. Then coming to the maritime operations, and obviously Bengal had Chalcolithic, Neolithic, early Stone Age sites which have been, excavated by archaeologists, even including Dr. B.B. Lal. So we will come and share all those details also. Then comes the maritime operation. When we see the maritime operation, it typically covers the, from the mouth of Ganges to the mouth of Godavari, which is a big 600 square kilometers coastline. And Tamralipta was the culmination point of the Uttarapath. So the Uttarapath typically in its full form used to cover from Tamralipta to Takshashila. And this is mentioned in Swayambhu Manu's Manusmriti also, which gives a detailed coverage of the trade and economics of this entire route. It also mentions the key towns, trading towns, which are there, like Kashi, Mathura, which is mentioned as Surasen, and then Takshashila itself, and then obviously Tamralipta, and then Magad. All these places are mentioned. And what is important here to understand is that the hinterland, what you can understand is the hinterland for the Tamralipta port, which was also a natural harbor. Tamralipta and Chilika for say, or the Chelipatao, which Huensang says, was a natural harbor. These were the two natural harbors, okay? And Saptagram came later, much later, but it was not a natural harbor. It used to have a good amount of trade from there. It was a river port, it's a very active river port, but it was never a natural harbor. If you see the natural harbors, it were the Tamralipta Bandar and the Chelipatao, Chelita. So some say it is Chilika itself, some say it is Dantapura, some say it is Manikapatna, some say it is Puri port. So, but whatever it is, these two ports being natural harbors were calling the mother vessels. The mother vessels used to come and dock over here, and there were exponential trade happening from here, just not to the Suvarnadipa, but also to Simhala, to Egypt, Sumeria, other African ports, or even to parts of Europe as well. And when I say Europe, there has been Roman medallions, Roman rowlet wares, knobbed wares, Chinese knobbed wares. They've all come out from this. And Tamralipta also, as a natural continuation, features in the descriptions by Huensang, Aising, and Faihian, all three of them, right? So does Chelipatao. So now, what is important in the trade operations is what we will discuss are the navigational techniques that were used, the kinds of boats or ships that were used, what were the techniques. And one of the very, when we discuss the history of Bengal or even for Kalinga for that matter, in both these cases, what I have seen is the extensive use of inland waterways. Those were the days where, and this I have found out as a part of my research for Brajmandal also. One of the key temples of Braj is the Radha Madan Mohan temple, and the Itihasa which is available, or the history which is available, is a Khatri businessman who used to deal in salt, was going to Mathura for selling his salt when his boat gets stuck just beside the Dwadash Aditya Tilla, on which Madan Mohan was staying that time. And by his grace, the boat gets released, and he builds a temple as per his wish or his commitment to Madan Mohan. But what needs to be seen that Khatris are the businessmen of Lahore, so they were all coming from Lahore using the inland waterways, Jamuna, then connecting to Prayagraj from or coming from Kashi. And there has been references where we have seen traders coming in boats with all the merchandise, not only from Lahore or the other northern main trading centers or Mathura or even Kashi to Tamralipta, unloading them, loading them in the ships, and then sending for trade to various regions. There have been extensive descriptions of that. And similarly, the reverse way around also. We have seen in a much later period, we have seen Rani Rashmini or Sri Ramakrishna traveling by the Bajra to Kashi.
It's also mentioned that Sri Chaitanya Dev went to Sri Bhumi, Sri Kshetra, that is Puri Dham, by sea route.
No, that's not correct. He went by the old Jagannath Sarak, which even exists today. So we will cover that when we will discuss the Bhakti movement. That's a typical part. And the Sri Jagannath Sarak, since you took up the topic, let me tell you for the benefit of the audience, the Sri Jagannath Sarak even today exists, and that is the main Sarak which was even used by all the invaders to desecrate the Jagannath temple. So Jagannath temple has been attacked as many as 18 times, even more than the Somnath temple, and we don't speak about it. And the route that was used by this was the Jagannath Sarak. And this is the same Sarak which was used by the pilgrims also. And at a certain point, they had to cross the Daya river. So I have personally traveled on the Jagannath Sarak, and I have seen the Daya river, which is huge actually, and where boats used to be there, and everybody used to cross. And that was the same route which was taken by Sri Chaitanya or Rup Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, or all of his other bhaktas, or even the entourage of devotees which used to come every year during Rath Yatra from Gaura, from Navadvip, okay, to Puri. They used to stay for 3-4 months, and once the rainy seasons were over, then they used to go back. So we will come to all those details when we discuss the Bhakti movement. Then comes another milestone which needs to be discussed in greater detail, but I will give you a little snippet of it, is the Turkish invasion, the Bakhtiyar-ud-Din Khilji episode. Was Bakhtiyar-ud-Din really that brave or that chivalrous that he defeated the Senas like the way it has been projected? No. We will come to those details in our later episodes, but let me tell you a few snippets of it, including the fact that the entire narrative, this is a narrative which has been built over a period of time. The entire narrative of this episode of Bakhtiyar Khilji is based on a single source of a book which was written by Minhaj Siraj, Tabaqt-e-Nasiri.
Islamic source.
Okay. And who was Minhaj? Minhaj was a chief Qazi under the Delhi Sultanate. After his retirement, he came to Bengal for 2 years, and during this time he wrote Tabaqt-e-Nasiri, and where he covers this episode. Now, what is important here for people to understand is, and this is very, very important, and that's why I'm specifically stressing on this, is this book or this event has been documented by Minhaj 40 years after it has happened. The incident happened in 1201 or 2, and it was documented in 1259, almost 40 years. And this being the only source, it was based on certain legends, ballads, folklores, and only on the documentation, testimony of 2 soldiers who were alive at that point of time, who were a part of the entourage of Bakhtiyar Khilji, who had survived later on. And though they were septuagenarians that time, so some of their memories were gone, and they, you can't rely on their versions actually. So, and what is more astonishing is that anyone who has read Tabaqt-e-Nasiri can find out he captured Lakshmanvati, the capital city, with just 18 horsemen. It is not possible because Senas were extremely powerful rulers. They were at the peak. They were at the peak when Lakshman Sen was ruling, and their entire, and at that point of time, Raj Mahal, in the slide I have mentioned Raj Mahal, and why I have specifically pointed out Raj Mahal is that because we will again and again come back to this entry point of Bengal, the Raj Mahal Hills, which is in the Santal Parganas of Jharkhand. Now, you people, everybody by this time has heard of Haldi Ghati, right? Now, what is a Ghati? Let's understand that, because in order to understand Raj Mahal Hills and the geography, it is a small pass between between the, 2 hills. These ghatis have been extensively used for guerrilla warfare by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj or Sahu Maharaj or even the Peshwas at a later date. And Raj Mahal Hills was a similar topography. Okay. So that being the only entry point of Bengal at that point of time, and that is where even at a much later date during the Mughal takeover, Raja Man Singh had also built forts and temples and set up a small fortified city also in Raj Mahal. Nothing of those structures survive, or very less survives today. But the fact is, that being the entry point, no ruler of Bengal will leave that vacant, right? So he will have a huge army standing over there, and so did Lakshman Sen. And the only part to give credit to, I think, Bakhtiyar Khilji is that he played little smart over there. He did not use this pass to come through because he knew that the forces are waiting over here. So he took a diversion technique. He bypassed that and came through a different route. We will discuss in the later episodes in detail, and that's how he entered. But the fact that he entered the capital city without any resistance and with 18 horsemen, he marches and arrives at the palace of Lakshman Sen, and just with that, seeing those 18 horsemen, Lakshman Sen escapes in his boat. Those are absolutely, unjustified and concocted stories, I would say. It is not possible. A ruler, and if had that been so, then how come Lakshman Sen or his descendants continued their rule very successfully from the Bangladesh, or which is Bangladesh right now, right? If they had truly been vanquished with entire army and their entire treasury and everything, or all their logistic setups, how could they rule from the Bangladesh, right? Points to ponder over. So when we discuss this episode in greater detail, we will cover those points. Then comes the Bhakti movement. So we touched upon that a little bit on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Discuss one of the key, is the Mughals, the Mughal takeover of Bengal. So there I have mentioned in the slide that you can see Man Singh, Islam Khan and the Baro Bhuiyas. So Man Singh was the first governor of Bengal under the Mughals who took over, and followed by Islam Khan. Both these gentlemen fought with the Baro Bhuiyas. So some of them were subdued by Man Singh, and rest of them were subdued by Islam Khan. But there is a stark difference in this surrender and negotiations between what Man Singh did and what Islam Khan did. The fact that Man Singh brought them under his rule or command as a vassal, pay them the taxes, they had to pay the taxes, they had signed tax arrangements with that they will not revolt and all that. But he did not imprison them, kill them, or do anything of that sort. Man Singh had left them after subjugating them. But Islam Khan actually went after them. He annihilated many of them, and including Pratapaditya. Pratap is a legendary figure in the history of Bengal or the history of Baro Bhuiya, Pratapaditya. But if you really look at it impartially, from a neutral point of view, he has been made equivalent to Maharana Pratap, but it is not that case. There have been novels, legends, ballads and folklores in his name, Pratapaditya, and there is another Baro Bhuiya, I'm forgetting his name. These two gentlemen, but particularly Pratap. Pratap murdered his own uncle who brought him up, trained him in education, military warfare, everything, Raja Basanta Rai, in the year 1600. He murdered him. And Pratap's Aradhya Devi, Jashareshwari, the famous Jashareshwari, now resides in Amer Fort as Sila Devi. Yeah, so Man Singh brought it, this thing, but how it reached Man Singh, so that is another story. There are versions. Some say the most accepted legend is Pratapaditya was captured by Man Singh and caged and was taken to Delhi, but he died on the way in Banaras. But that is not the case. That is not the case. That is not true history. This is a legend which has been made. The real history is he, as I said, he was alive. He was allowed to operate under Man Singh, and after Man Singh left and Islam Khan took over, he again raised his head along with his son Udayaditya, the eldest son. And Pratap undoubtedly had a huge navy, and that is why it becomes important to understand the naval warfare. Apart from maritime operations in eastern India, the struggle between the Mughals and the Baro Bhuiyas and the Pathans per se, the Pathans also and the Arakanese and the Mughals, is the extensive naval warfare that happened. The use of gunboats.
Mention the legend about legends. There is also that legend that the kings of
Which kings?
Sinhala.
Simhala, okay.
Simhala kings are the descendant from Bengali rulers, Bengali dynasty.
There could be possibilities. There are also, it's proven, not Bengal, but it is the Kalingan rulers. Because even today in Kalinga, let's say in the Ganjam district, you find surnames with Ratnaike, Guru Singhe and all that. And we know from Indian Sri Lankan cricket team there has been Ranatunga. Ranatunga is also there in Ganjam. Ratnaike is there.
Yes, the
Guru Singhe is
Singhali
there.
language in linguistic terms
Yes.
is also a language isolate, that's Indo-Aryan
Yes, correct,
language.
correct. So, Indo-Aryan is a different. That is a that is more of a narrative that I would say. But if we really look at the genealogy, we look at the DNA analysis, we look at the anthropological data. Aryan invasion is a myth per se, and there have been many scholars in the last 50, 60 or 70 years who have tried to say, even for the Bengali race, that Bengali race, particularly the Brahmins, evolved after the Aryan invasion. Okay, again, that's not true. We will discuss all that in the people, sources and geography segment. And, and we will see how these things have been summed up. Basically, they are summed up over a period of time. So coming back to the Barabuhiya struggle and Islam Khan. So it was Islam Khan who actually defeated Pratap by all means, vanquished his army, and he had to surrender. And then Islam Khan actually took him. But his deity, Jeshureshwari, was recovered by Man Singh, and he took up. And in this struggle, if we see, the other fascinating aspects comes out is the contribution of Raja Man Singh, the Kachawa ruler and one of the key commanders of Akbar, is his contribution to Sanatan Dharma. People often misunderstand him because he fought against Pratap in the Battle of Haldighati, but yes, that's a fact. Nobody can run away from that. But having said that, his contributions to Sanatan Dharma is enormous, and that has been completely overlooked till today in Indian history. Not only his contributions to Brajmandal, but also his contributions to entire Eastern India, be it the Sri Jagannath temple, be it building temples around Patna or Patliputra or other areas in Bihar, or even in Bengal, particularly Rajmahal Hills, or even in Dhaka, Ichapur, Ichamati, all these places, is phenomenal, and that really needs to be looked into. And I will cover parts of that so that, for the benefit of the audience, we should have a greater look at all these contributions from this Kachawa, legend. Then we will also discuss of course, the arrival of the Orientalists under the leadership of the first Governor General of Bengal, Warren Hastings, H.H. Wilson, James Prinsep, William Jones, W.W. Hunter, Halhed, Duncan, and of course, the contributions by H.T. Colebrook. Now, the slides are there which will explain you the evolution of the Asiatic Society of Bengal, Epigraphica Indica, the national museums, and how finally the Archaeological Survey of India comes into existence. So these two slides that I have given for this is self-explanatory, and just hold them for a minute so that the audience can go through it. It's very self-explanatory with the data, which year what happened and what are the contributions comes in. But what we need to understand is, when Archaeological Survey of India comes into being, it doesn't start any conservation work per se. The first job, or for the first few years, or first few decades, which Archaeological Survey of India does is enlisting. All the archaeological sites, they does enlisting. Excavation starts much later because they do not have the knowledge, the expertise to do excavations. They only start enlisting, and during the part of enlistment, whatever artifacts, murals, etc. they recover, they start putting it in the National Museum, and to start with more so in the Asiatic Society.
Looting of the archaeological remains, get them back to Britain, It's now in British Museum, Mary archaeological remains. So that's part came later.
That comes much later. That comes much later. The Orientalists were not responsible for this. That was primarily by the imperial British Raj under the Queen that has happened, because that starts at a much later date when they actually form the archaeological survey and start the excavations and to some extent temple restorations also. But what is here important here to understand is, in this entire cycle or chain of events, what comes out is the development of the Asiatic Society, the development of Epigraphica Indica, which is the repository of manuscripts, the Journal of Asiatic Society, then comes the National Museums, and then comes the work of, or the actual work of deciphering the inscriptions and manuscripts and translations work. So where Wilson, James Prinsep, or Colebrooke, they are the pioneers, particularly these three gentlemen, Wilson, Colebrooke and James Prinsep, and obviously Sir William Jones, the master. And we can't run away from this fact that these Orientalists were the people who actually, they had a very deep appreciation for the Sanatani culture or the Indian culture and heritage. They had a deep appreciation. They were not like somebody like Macaulay or Alexander Cunningham, who used to put them aside. Anything Hindu, they used to put them aside. But these people originally, for that matter, Warren Hastings himself used to go to the Kalighat temple quite often. So we will cover those in very detail when we discuss the Orientalists and their journey. Or even he went to Kashi, sat down with the Pandits and Shastragya Pandits to understand and learn Sanskrit and do translations, all of them who have worked actually, learning the Pali script, Brahmi script, or the Kharoshti script for that matter. Yeah, because when you do excavation, when Dr. B.B. Lal did the excavations for Tamralipta, he had discovered Kharoshti script, and Kharoshti script you read in the opposite direction, right? And Kharoshti script was something which was more prevalent in the northwestern province of India, right? So yeah, so that's the Orientalist, of course, is to say.
So we maybe can also discuss about the economic terms. In that era, maybe there are big business houses, Bengali business houses, and the British colonialists are taking help from these houses also.
Yes, classic example was Jagat Seth.
Yes, sir.
But what people doesn't know, Jagat Seth is a title.
Yes.
Right? Do you know that? Jagat Seth is actually a title, it is not a name. The Jagat Seth it's like Vedavyas. Vedavyas is a title, right? But the Vedavyas who wrote Mahabharata, or Jaya and Bharat for that matter, is Krishnadaipa and Vedavyas. The Buddha is Shakyamuni actually. But fact is, his name was Fateh Chand. Actually, it was Fateh Chand. So yes, you're right, but the detailed help that you are mentioning, that comes a little later, in the later centuries, towards the mid of 19th century and all that, post independence struggle. So first battle of independence, Sepoy Mutiny. It comes much after that, not in the early wars. So this is the Orientalist, and the two things which are not spoken of, and probably for the first time in mainstream media and mainstream history that we will discuss, is the indigo cultivation, the oppression of the indigo, revolt, the revolt happening due to the indigo cultivation and oppression of 1859. So there was a revolt of 1857, the Sepoy Mutiny that we all know, but there was a follow-up revolt in 1859 limited to Bengal, which pushed the empire to rethink their strategy. And there was a lot of bloodbath also over there. Famine followed by famines. Why, how, all those we will discuss. And as a prelude, natural prelude to that is discussion of the dacoits of Bengal, the Baghdis, who spearheaded this revolution, which we do not know, which we do not speak of in the mainstream media. Bishwanath Sardar, the first martyr of Indigo revolution, Indigo resistance was Bishwanath Sardar, a dacoit per se, a Robin Hood, and the first one to attack the Nil Kutis. The Kutis, or where the Nil production used, the indigo plantations, the
That
productions
indigo
used to.
cultivators are maybe the main reason for choosing dacoity as their profession, because they lost their jobs.
There are many factors for that. There are many factors for that. And you are right to that extent, because what the indigo planters used to do was to force the local populace to stop cultivating the crops and start cultivating indigo because of their profits. And these land masses which were where indigo came in, first they were do fasali or teen fasali, 2 crops or 3 crops a year yielding lands. So they were extremely fertile. And when you do indigo cultivation in those lands, it becomes completely infertile, right? So you are bombarded from both the ends. So that's one thing. Then the load of taxes on these people levied on them. Taxes were very high, and if we look at the data, I will present data when we do this episode from the Asiatic Society of Bengal, from the Journal of Asiatic Society of Bengal. I will present this data, where you will see the exponential growth of indigo traffic from Bengal to Europe, and how Bengal becomes number 1 from a position of number 13 or 14 to number 1 in a span of 50 to 60 years. So you can imagine the horrendous oppression that was inflicted on the masses, and dacoits were a byproduct of those oppression. And not only that, they were looting. They were looting the zamindars, who were allies to these indigo cultivators, and distributing the wealth in the public in terms of food, in terms of clothing and all that stuff. But they were also keeping a check on the armory of the British over there. Now that's one thing. And secondly, as I said, that these dacoits, if we study them, it's a fascinating story which has never been told in the mainstream media, and that's why I thought of bringing this to the forefront. And all of them used to be devotees of Mahakali, and the Mahakali Vigrahas used by them on those days are still alive and worshipped and venerated in Bengal even today. And they are some of them are present in proper Calcutta city. I personally go to one of those temples, the Manohar Pukur Kalibari, which was worshipped by Manohar Dakat, right? One of those Bagdis, famous Bagdis who led the charge. But of course, amidst all these Bagdis who were, fighting against the indigo cultivators, the top one was obviously Bishwanath Sardar, or Bishe Dakat, that we all know, and he was the first martyr. He was captured and hanged, So that's how Bengal starts at. We will also discuss the genocides, the temple iconoclasm, the terracotta temples of Vishnupur, which are standing in queue to become a UNESCO World Heritage Site for the last 4 to 5 years that I know as a part of ICOMOS. I don't know when that's going to happen. And of course, the 2 major avatar Purush in Bengal, one was obviously Sri Chaitanya, whom we will discuss in Bhakti, and then obviously Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, without whom the history of Bengal is incomplete. So when we touch upon this, we will touch upon a plethora of other issues like the Arya Samaj and the evangelical movement. And the biggest I think the contribution of both these avatar Purush is one, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, Bengal was seeing an absolute takeover of Islam. Islam was taking over Bengal. So he kind of reversed that. Similarly, we see a similar trend with Ramakrishna, who put a hold, Swami Vivekananda, who put a hold on the evangelical movements, arising out of Sri Rampur. Sri Rampur was the hub of all those. And one thing that I have also I will discuss in very detail, because that's a very heated topic. I know many people are going to throw bricks and brats at me, but doesn't matter. But history needs to be told as it is the Maratha incursion, the Bargi attacks that we all know. And it is nothing but a fight between Alivardi Khan and Raghuji Bhosle of Nagpur. But what people don't know that in order to save Alivardi, Marathas fought the Marathas in Bengal. That's an irony. The Peshwa fought the Bhosles. The Peshwa Nana Sahib, came with his force because Alivardi agreed to Peshwa's proposal of paying chaut.
It was not a rivalry.
It is not a rivalry, and Raghuji Bhosle was invited to Bengal by the son-in-law of Sarfaraz Khan, who was murdered by Alivardi before he took the Masnad of Bengal, Suba Bengal. So there was a rivalry where the Marathas were brought in, and at a later date the Marathas also suffered equal losses. It's just not, people keep saying that, oh, there was so much of loss in Bengal. Yeah, there were so much of losses because the Bargis were the Pindaris. The Maratha cavalry had 4 sections. So 4 sections, out of the 4 sections, the 4th section were the Pindaris, and the Pindaris were nothing but mercenaries. And today, and if you really see at the history, who were the Pindaris? Pindaris had a mix of everybody. It had Afghans, it had the Musalmans, it had the Hindu warriors, it had the Jats or the Marathas, and everybody was there in the Pindaris. And Pindaris were extensively used not only by the later Peshwas, but they were also used by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. They were also used by Peshwa Bajirao. And the cavalry speed, the much famed cavalry speed, or the Maratha light cavalry that we all know of, where did it come from? It was actually a product of the Pindaris. The core of the cavalry which used to stay with the Peshwa, and whose reference we find a lot about when we discuss the Third Battle of Panipat, is the Huzuriyat cavalry. The Huzuriyat cavalries were the cream of the cavalry, which used to stay with the Peshwa, direct command of the Peshwas, like his bodyguards, or you can say something like Napoleon's First Army. Okay, the cream. Somebody in today's world, you can see the NSG commandos or somebody of that sort. Or the
coming back to Bengal, as the narrative goes, so the Bargis, the Maratha plunderers, they're actually doing plundering and
they did plunder, they did loot, but if you see,
that's not the whole picture.
No, that is a part of it. That is a part of it. There is no running away from the fact that they did not plunder, they did not loot. They did plunder and they did loot, because the payment system of the Pindaris were from there. They were not salaried people. They were like that. So if you look at all the Islamic invaders that have plundered us, it is a similar, the more you plunder, the more wealth you acquire, each of the individual soldiers. Why they were genocides? Let's say, for example, in Third Battle of Panipat, why there was so much of genocide by Ahmad Shah Abdali? Because each Pathan soldier or the Durrani Sena was given that the more number of heads, the per head, I will give you 4 or 5 rupees, if I can correctly remember, by none other than Ahmad Shah Abdali. That's why there was so much of genocide, and they built towers of skull in front of each tent. In front of each of the Sardar's tent, Pathan Sardar, Durrani Sardar, like Barkhurdar Khan, you have tower of skulls, which is a very regular practice of the Islamic invaders. So there are a lot of aspects. The other fact is there were 21 Maratha generals, including Bhaskar Pandit or Bhaskar Ram, who was murdered in cold blood by Alivardi Khan. And he called them in the pretext of doing a sandhi or a truce, and he murdered them in cold blood, hacked. They were hacked. And if you looked at the description, the way those 21 generals were hacked, it's gruesome. It's actually gruesome, inhuman.
Nobody talks about that.
Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about this infamous incident where 21 Maratha generals were hacked, and they were hacked to pieces, let me tell you. They were hacked to pieces. Like the Maratha Peshwa Narayan Rao was hacked, the 16, 17-year-old boy who was hacked to pieces by Sumer Singh Gardi under the influence of Anandibai and Raghoba. And these people were hacked to pieces.
That kind of atrocities are normalized by Islamic.
Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is that there are multiple aspects which we should look at. The other very much a very high level propaganda which also is told about the Maratha incursions of Bengal is the destruction of temples, which is not true. Marathas definitely looted and plundered, but they never desecrated any temples. For example, I will do you two anecdotes. One is they started a Durga Puja, Bhaskar Ram himself, in Katwa, which is still prevalent, 300 years on, which is still prevalent.
That's not ever been a conflict between Saivites and Shaktas?
No, never. That is complete propaganda. This is complete propaganda. That's why I said that let's look at history as it is. The job of a historian or a cultural heritage person is to bring out the facts and figures as it exists. So we will have to look at both the sides, what happened and what did not happen. We have to look at the treaties that were signed, what were there in those treaties and how it was followed, who fought against war as a part of those treaties, who sided with whom as a part of those treaties, what were the geography involved for controlling of these cities, and most importantly, these fights between Ali Vardi, Raghuji Bhosle, Peshwa Nana Sahib, they all circle back to the Chhatrapati Sahu Maharaj in Satara, which people do not know. The fight between Raghuji Bhosle and Nana Sahib Peshwa starts from the days when Peshwa Bajirao Balhar passes away and Nana Sahib puts his claim to become the Peshwa. And Raghuji Bhosle is one of the key opponents who opposes it. And that is the time when the rivalry starts. And this rivalry spills over to Bengal. Unfortunately, probably Sahu Maharaj could have done a better job in controlling them, but due to his failing health, age and all that factor, it did not happen, or it did not go that way. And these two were extremely powerful, both of them. And at a certain point of time, the power balance was more with Raghuji Bhosle even than Peshwa Nana Sahib.
So talking about invasions in Bengal, so we may talk about the Bhutia invasions also from the northeastern side.
We will have to look at Tibetan. That's why I said the Indo-Tibetan blood coming in. So we will also look at those invasions. And when we see the invasions, rather than invasions, I would say that we will have to see the struggle between the Mughals, the Pathans, and the Hindu kings. Basically, these are the tripartite struggle that spills over from between centuries, and we will, as a part of that, when we discuss iconoclasm in Bengal, we will discuss the much talked about Pathan general,
religiously,
the Pashtun Pathan general Kala Pahar.
Right.
That has to be discussed in greater detail.
Kala Pahar is not originally a Hindu prince.
No, he is not a Hindu Brahmin. He is not a Hindu Brahmin.
Oh,
he
that is also a propaganda.
Yes, that is also a propaganda. He is originally a Pashtun Pathan who comes and joins Suleiman Karnani's forces, rises to the rank of a commander. And Suleiman Karnani is probably the Sikandar Batshiko of East. He is probably the Sikandar Batshiko of East, the slayer of idols. Okay, and when we look at those chapters, we will understand in greater detail that how Suleiman Karnani, when he dispatches his forces for Kalinga under his son Baizad, supported by the key commander Kala Pahar, how they take down temples, how they have taken down temples like anything, not only in Bengal but also in Orissa or Kalinga for that matter. And the fact remains that in spite of all these things that Bengal has seen, that even today, as per the last ASI data which I have seen in 2023, Bengal still stands at number 4 in terms of ancient temples or medieval temples.
Okay.
Still number 4. I personally used to assume that probably Orissa would have the highest number of temples compared to Bengal, because the resistance, successful resistance, was much more in Orissa.
Do we find enough remains?
There are a lot of remains. There are a lot of remains. I mean, there are, I'll give you a small data. ASI has only 3% of the built heritage. That's why I said that, you know, understanding cultural heritage in its completeness is very important. Otherwise, people will not be able to relate. So, built heritage, ASI has only 3% of the total stock enlisted with it, which is approximately 11,000. And that is why when we see that data of 65,000 temples destroyed and, you know, so many temples are not registered, you go to Orissa, you go to Bengal, you will find ancient temples, medieval temples, little bit in the rural side if you go, aplenty even now, aplenty which are not even enlisted with the state archaeology. So you'll have to understand one thing. There is ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, which is the central body, and there are the respective state archaeology under the state governments. And the irony is that even today, some of the state archaeology departments are mixed with cultural departments of that state, and there are no experts available to man those departments in the archaeology segment. And you know, many of the states, I mean, I've gone to Orissa, I've gone to, you know, MP, where I go quite often, or even to, you know, UP, Braj Mandal. There are many temples which are under state archaeology and is in absolute shambles. There are no funds, enough funds are not allocated. And to be very candid, we have a problem of plenty. We have a problem of plenty, which means that we have too much of heritage with us, being the oldest surviving civilization, which is obviously natural, and we do not have funds to manage them. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as a heritage conservationist, whatever project I put my hands into, the biggest two problem that I face is problem of too much or too many, and the funds. You want to restore an artwork, you require funds. You want to do an excavation, you require fund. You want to conserve a temple on a continual basis, you require funds. But the only good thing is that the two things that I see is the parliamentary recommendations of splitting up ASI. If that happens now, that will be very good. The second one is the government of India, or per se, ASI per se, you know, requesting tenders, opening up tenders to the private sector for the maintenance, preservation and conservation of many of the built heritages. Like Dalmia Cements have adopted the Purana Kila. Okay, so in a similar way they are doing it for some other structures also. So that's one good thing which has started, but obviously it is a long way to go and things need to speed up, because some of the built heritages are in extreme dire conditions which requires immediate attention.
One strange thing is that, you know, taking into account the cultural similarity between Orissa and Bengal, the temple architecture in Bengal, we don't found those kind of architecture style in Bengal anymore.
See, there are two points here. Bengal has when we discuss the temples of Bishnupur, we will also discuss the temple architecture of Bengal. The most celebrated temple architecture is the Archala model. The most celebrated.
I heard that came much later.
The concept of the temple architecture itself much came later. If we look at the evolution of temples right from 2nd century BCE or 5th century BCE, they were only raised platforms open from all ends. So we can cover that as well as one of our episodes. But the fact remains, Archala being the latest and the most evolved version, the complete matured version, I would say. Like in Kalinga, you see the Rekha Deul system. The Lingaraj temple or the Konark Sun temple or the Sri Jagannath temple are the are specimens of fully blossomed temple architecture, Kalingan temple architecture, where you have the Rekha Deul, Khakra Deul, Pira Deul, everything Pancharata style,
Point I'm
Saptarata
trying
style.
to make that we lost those archaeological sites.
No. A lot of archaeological sites have been lost to iconoclasm, but the temple architecture technology is not lost. It is still there. It is still there. And interestingly, as a part of my site surveys, what I have found is, I'll take example of Puri, where a lot of Bengali population goes. In Puri, there is a spot, Markandeya Shahi, where Markandeya Mahadev is worshipped. That is the place where Rishi Markandeya did his tapa. That temple complex with a pond, huge pond, was I think created by Anantavarma Chodagangadev in 12th century. He dug that up and he created that space for settling some of the Sevaite clans. But what is astonishing here, when I visited it, I think 2 years back, I found a Archala temple over there. A Bengal fully blossom Archala temple with the Kalingan architecture residing together. I was unable to find out the history of that. Nobody was able to tell me, but probably I'll still try to find out sometimes later. But this actually shows the amalgamation of within Eastern India, the two style of temple architecture within the same premises. Because we know that Puri, just like Haridwar or Kashi or Braj, was one of the most highly venerated sacred sites for the Bengalis. So I am not surprised that if some Bengali zamindar or somebody influential would have made the temple over there.
But do Bengal ever had a large temple structure like Puri Jagannath?
Yes, it did have. Your classic example is the biggest Shiva temple of entire Eastern and Southeast Asia was the Adinath temple, which is now the Adina Mosque.
Right.
The Adinath temple was the biggest Shiva temple of entire Eastern India. It was a huge complex. And this is and it's not that we am saying, it has been accepted by Archaeological Survey of India, and it has been put up over there that this was a Shiva temple. You have the Shivlings available over there even now.
They accept the truth. And there is also the legacy that Monindipa De had a talk with us. He showed us from academic research that the temples of Himachal, they have a connection to Bengal.
Not only a connection, I'm sure what Manidipa has covered is the Pala architecture in Himachal. Because the Pala kingdom had stretched at its peak to Himachal. So obviously many of the Pala rulers had contributed to the temples. They had built temples in those regions, which has a Bengal influence over there. But if you really look at the temple architecture of Himachal, it is a mix of Bengal and the North Indian Nagara style. Like the Kalingan temple architecture is actually a mix of the Nagara and Kalingan style together.
So on that note, sir, we will conclude today's talk. Today's talk is only about the points we have to cover in the next episodes, like the high and low of Bengal history, and also the other things like the maritime and naval history of Bengal, contribution of Sri Chaitanya Dev, personalities like Sri Chaitanya Dev and Sri Ramakrishna. So, sir, any concluding comment?
I think we have a lot of ground to cover in the next episodes, and let us try to give to our audience the best of information that we can capture and share.
Thank you very much.